We are in our second week of a new study series, At the Table, being in dialogue with each other, contemplating the advices that lay and clergy leadership from many countries in the United Methodist Church offer as a resource for our contemplation through the revised social principles of the United Methodist Church in 2024. Now, what the social principles are advices because originally that's what they were uh, titled to be. And this is the United Methodist way to honor differences rather than requiring obedience and agreement. Many, uh, not all, but many faith communities choose to deal with differences in other ways. Rather than dialogue, which requires listening and responding, some faith groups deal with differences behind a podium, which prevents uh, listening and responding. They choose monologue and indoctrination for the purpose of convincing others to agree. Other faith groups simply create standards and doctrines to which members and participants must affirm to gain entrance to the fellowship of like minded believers. United Methodists are not seeking like minded believers. We're committed to being agents of agape love in relationship to each other and those we serve. The United Methodist experience at the table includes freedom for each person to think for themselves, understanding, standing under another, supporting them even though we do not agree, reconciliation, being willing to live and work with those with whom we disagree, and grace, accepting each other first as children of God. Now, the miracle of dialogue that takes place at this table fosters creativity and new thoughts, new plans, whereas monologue and entrance standards of opinion fosters compromise and agreement based on power, control, and tradition. To be sure, the table is not efficient. It takes time. It takes time, but it's the United Methodist way. Freedom, understanding, reconciliation, and grace take time to live with and for each other, but it enables communities to grow in wisdom and in stature and in favor of the God of love, agape love. Indeed, I recall the insight of the great theologian who shared that the speed of God is 3 miles an hour. Not the speed of sound, not the speed of sight, but 3 miles an hour. Why? Because 3 miles an hour is the speed with which human beings walk. God's Spirit, uh, that which is beside us as we take our journey of faith, is entitled God with us. This is the meaning of Emmanuel, 3 miles an hour, because if God is with us, that means that God's speed is our speed. At the table, taking time, the United Methodist Way. Now, last week we considered the advice through the social principles that our creation is in peril. A very good friend of mine shared with me a quote from a French astrophysicist. This is what this person said about creation being in peril. Quote, "Man is the most insane species. He worships an invisible God and destroys a visible nature, unaware that this nature he is destroying is this God that he is worshiping." That's not in the social principles, but it's a wonderful summary of what we dealt with last week. That what the insanity of humanity is all about is overreach, widespread, over-reliance, driven by the desire for economic profit and technological advancement. Now, this week, we take a look at the next section of the social principles in relationship to creation, and that is entitled The Stewardship of Creation. It's really tragic that early translations of the Hebrew library describe that humans were created to have dominion over the earth. That's not an accurate translation of the Hebrew word. The Hebrew word is not accurately translated dominion. It is to take care of. The advice we receive is that human beings have substituted dominion, rule, and control for care, doing the very best for the created order. That's what the social principles are saying about our stewardship of creation. And they deal with different subjects. In this section, one set of advices has to do with environmental racism, the collective actions that the degradation of the natural world have had far more impact on economically marginalized people throughout the world. And to confront environmental racism, strategies must be guided by the awareness that strategies developed to care for the earth include caring for all persons on this planet Earth. No clan, no tribe, no culture, no religion, no nation are excluded from this commitment to care for creation. Beyond environmental racism, our social principles lifts up that practices and policies must be sustainable rather than temporary. You see, temporary policies and practices too often just benefit the current generation. Short-term practices and policies are inappropriate because caring for the earth is not for the sake of now, for often that which is good for now prevents care to be even possible in the future. Yes, environmental racism, sustainable practices, and food justice is a phrase that is used in the social principles, which affirms that all persons in every location on this planet Earth have the right for healthy, culturally appropriate food. One word of advice that is fascinating in the social principles is the encouragement to oppose the patenting of seed varieties, which has reduced access to traditional crops and increased the indebtedness of smaller scale farms. Produced by a global representation of the United Methodist Church, lifting up under the title of food justice the danger of patenting, which is driven by economic greed, but indeed increases the indebtedness of smaller scale farms that we refer to in this culture as the family farm. The final section in this part of the social principles on stewardship for creation, I just will lift for our contemplation is entitled Affirming Science and Traditional Wisdom. This is what I will read from the social principles. Quote, we affirm the value of science and reason in providing deeper understandings of the origins and the functioning of the cosmos. We acknowledge that, like all human endeavors, science can be abused and misused. We therefore urge all those involved in scientific investigations to adhere to the highest ethical standards in conducting research. We also affirm the traditional wisdom found within indigenous communities, particularly the emphasis that Native and First Persons have placed on living in harmony and balance with the earth and other animals, as well as the need to protect the air, land, and water. As I shared in another study series, well, I learned from our indigenous Indian in the United States, creation is cooperation with other animals and all of nature. This is a powerful and stimulating section, and it's based on the assumption that every generation has a role of trusteeship, holding in trust the planet Earth for the next generation. This trusteeship is based on taking care of an asset rather than depleting the asset. Trusteeship is based on caring for rather than having dominion over. Oh, there's so much there. But for your thought and conversation, let me ask 3 questions. To what extent are you comfortable with the United Methodist Church at the table, understanding of dialogue as a way to acknowledge and live with differences of opinion. Secondly, what are illustrations of current or past temporary and therefore unsustainable practices and strategies in caring for our planet Earth? Finally, what are illustrations of practices and strategies which reject scientific findings and the wisdom of indigenous communities? A time of dialogue is before us. Thank you.